Welcome back to the Forward Party podcast, while we explore how America's political system can better serve the people it represents. In this episode, we're stepping back to look at the big picture, the rise of independent voters, the role of our institutions, and what history can teach us about where our democracy is headed. First, we'll talk with Chris Cillizza, a longtime political journalist and analyst, about why independents are now the largest voting bloc in this country, and whether a stronger independent presence in Congress could help break today's gridlock. Then we'll be joined by Professor Jeremi Suri, a historian who studies American leadership and political change. He'll help us put this moment into historical context, exploring past periods of upheaval, long-term shifts in party politics, and the kinds of reforms that have helped to stabilize democracy before. Because understanding where we've been is essential to understanding where we're going. Let's get started. Today on the Forward Party podcast, we are thrilled to have journalist and political analyst Chris Cillizza join us today. Chris, I followed very excitedly your commentary following Elon Musk's announcements last year that he was intending on starting a new political party. And so excited to talk to you about kind of your thinking around a new political party in America, and specifically independent voters right now, independent voting trends, and what we are seeing around the country with our new Gallup numbers showing us that 45% of Americans now self-identify as independent. So Lieutenant Governor Healey and Governor Whitman, welcome, Chris.
Welcome.
Hey, Governor. Hey, Lieutenant Governor. How are you all?
Good to see you. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I love talking independence.
Yeah. So what did you think when Elon made that announcement? Were you thinking it's harder than it looks?
Yes. Gosh, I feel like the old Peanuts cartoon where Lucy holds the football, and she's like, Charlie Brown, come kick it. And he runs up and he misses it and falls on his head. I feel like a lot of times that is the third party movement in America, which is, it looks totally doable. You look at it and you think, well, I mean, like, perfect example. You look at the Gallup numbers, you're like, oh, this is the only political party
market opportunities there. Why wouldn't?
Right. 45% of the public, the trend line is all up. Whereas both Democrats and Republican self-identification is way down. And I just think it's a lot harder than it looks, from Americans.
We're familiar.
Yes.
We
figured that out.
Right. And I think Elon, I think when you're a very, very, very rich person and you have a lot of political power, as he does, I think he pops off a lot. And I think I always kind of took that a little bit more as that than, oh, well, this is definitely what's going to happen. I always say the opportunity is absolutely there now more than ever before. It's just a lot of the work, I think, is unsexy work, right? It's not that everything in politics is sexy, but it's, it's like gathering signatures, running candidates for state legislative offices, not just for president. You know what I mean? Like, we start top down rather than bottom up. It's like, oh, well, we'll just run a candidate for president. It's like, oh, I mean, that's not a terrible idea. At the same time, without any infrastructure, even if, let's say, that person won, it might be hard to sustain. And so, again, I think it's easy to say we should have a third party. It's harder to do. And I think you really need thoughtful people who understand the sometimes mundane tasks of organizing these sorts of things, because otherwise it won't come together.
I never actually believed he was going to follow through with it. It was too much work. He wasn't interested in that.
It's a huge amount of work.
It's a huge amount of work, and it is the unsexy work. But it's exactly what we're trying to do with Forward. And do you think after his announcement, and then it just sort of petered out and died, but do you think that has awakened an interest, piqued more of an interest in the fact of an independent party or opportunity in people in general?
I don't know that, because I will tell you, I mean, every conversation I have with someone who's not a politician affiliated with one of the two parties or a partisan who's affiliated with one of the two parties, every conversation I have in this, when you're a political reporter and people know what you do for a living, they often ask you about politics. And every conversation I have, or let's say 85%, somebody brings up like, isn't there a better system? Isn't there a better way? And I always say like, yes, I talked to him about ranked choice voting. I talked to him about non-party primaries. I talked to him about third parties. Like there are better ways. I think the issue is we are a habit-driven people, whether we like it or not. We run by habit, and you may not like the two political parties. In fact, I think demonstrably people don't like or trust the two political parties or think either of those parties have their best interests at heart. But you're used to voting for one of the two of them. And that's a hard habit. That's a real challenge to sort of break. So I think yes, of course, Elon saying that and it getting so much attention doesn't hurt, I don't think. But for me, the interest I've seen in the last 5-10 years is there. For sure. It's just a getting from interest to execution.
Yep.
I think most people don't understand how to do that because they're not political in any way. But even the people who do understand it, I think Elon probably looked at it for 10 minutes and was like, I can't just throw money at this problem. So I'm, probably not going to follow through on it. And it is a money problem, but it's not exclusively a money problem. I think it's a human nature. What we say we want something different. Well, you have to give them a credible different and then convince them to vote for something. It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And what struck me about that moment was that everyone got really excited about the possibility of there being a viable third alternative. And the reason why they were excited was not because that opportunity doesn't always exist. Of course, a third opportunity always exists, but that someone well-known and with the means able to maybe actually make it happen was going to stand behind it. And so one of the challenges we have at the Forward Party every day is to say what you were saying before, which is third-party movements have to be movements. They have to start at the grassroots level.
That's
they have
exactly
to be,
right.
We've been celebrating today, all the folks who've helped us elect mayoral candidates and state legislators' seats. Those are the people
huge.
who are going to make that happen. And so my question is, how can you give the public confidence that this is actually viable in the absence of having like one galvanizing billionaire, which is, I think, the one thing we don't want.
Yeah.
We don't want a galvanizing billionaire. So what would give the public confidence in the absence of that kind of support?
Increasing proof points, right? I think in everything, proof of concept is really, really important. I could go to people and be like, hey, I want to do a podcast and it's going to be this thing and that thing. It's less likely to sell than if I say, here's a podcast I'm doing. Do you like it and do you want to sponsor it? Right? We just struggle to conceptualize. It's easier to be like, here's a thing. Do you like it or you don't like it? The state legislative victories. Again, I think if I could give people who want a third party one piece of his advice, it would be stop making it top down. Stop making it rich guy. Candidly, it's almost always a guy. Yeah. Rich guy who's bored with being rich and wants political power. Right? Like that model doesn't work. It has to be bottom up. And I think you just have to point people to, we won here. One of the races I'm most interested in is Mike Dugan in the Michigan governor's race, right?
Us too. Right. Yes.
That's a real chance. He's in the mid to high 20s. The front runners are Democrat and Republicans are in the low 30s. He's a Democrat ostensibly, or was, as mayor of Detroit. But that's intriguing to me. Dan Osborne in Nebraska is interesting. Right. I think in South Dakota, there's going to be a candidate. Or Montana, excuse me. In Montana, there's going to be an independent candidate. I think you have to prove proof of concept. Otherwise, what winds up happening, and you guys know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but people always say to me, I say, look at this. They'll say like, oh, the third party candidate in any race is at 8% or 10% or whatever. And I'm like, or even 15%. And I always say, here's the problem. Watch as it gets closer to election day and then watch the actual election results. Because the problem is if Democrats at 42, the Republicans at 40, and the independents at 15, and the rest is undecided. What winds up happening the closer it gets to election day and in the actual ballot box is people go in there and they don't like the idea of what they perceive to be throwing their vote away, right? You always see the third party underperform in those ways because they don't think the third party can win. The key is you have to show, yes, this is a viable alternative, not just a spoiler, but a viable alternative who can win. And Mike Dugan, I think, I'm intrigued by that. I mean, not just because it's Michigan, it's a swing state, but he has the profile. He is at a place in polling where he's basically running statistically even with the likely Democratic and Republican nominees. And if you get an independent elected governor, I think that's something, and so I think you can't just have that. You have to have the bottom up point. You have to have state legislators and stuff doing it. But I think that's how you do it, because then you make people say, okay, it's not just you like the idea of someone who's not a Democrat or Republican. Here's an actual human, or here's 15 humans who they may not align with everything you believe, but they align broadly with this idea that the two parties have not fixed things. And this person is actually in office. And I think that's really important.
Well, and I think the slates of those up and down those ballots is incredibly powerful. There's this concept that Run for Something has kind of socialized about the reverse coattails effect, right? So you've got a Mike Duggan at the top of the ticket, but then you've got independent individuals running for mayors or county executive seats and things like that. People that you really know, you experience, you recognize in your community, and you go, oh well, they're running as a forward party candidate or as an independent, and I like them, and I served on the PTA with that person, and oh well, they're on the slate with Rick Bennett at the top of the ticket in Maine, who's running as an independent as well. Okay, I start to feel and understand what this looks like, and it feels credible and it feels real. And we're seeing just an incredible number of candidates filing outside
especially
the two-party
at the
system.
gubernatorial level.
Absolutely.
So in Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota, we have a forward candidate running.
Great candidate there.
I
you're
think
singing our song. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think it is, you have to show that there's a real path to victory. It can't feel like a protest vote or a spoiler vote, because ultimately, if it's a protest vote or it's a spoiler vote, usually those aren't the winner.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is that we aren't going into the states where you're likely to be a spoiler vote. We aren't going into those hotly contested states that you focus on during presidential races. We're really looking at the 80% of the country where one party dominates everything, and people don't really have a choice at the ballot box. And so we're not spoiling anything. We're actually providing choice in an environment where there just really hasn't been any, in some cases, for decades.
Right. And, Lieutenant Governor, to that point, one thing that I always say to people is, look at, yes, there are 435 House members up every 2 years. Yes, there are about 33 or 34 senators up, and there's, somewhere between 30 and 35 governors, 36 governors this year. Look at the number of them, particularly in the House, where they face no competition. That's bad for democracy.
Yeah. That's 70%.
I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican. One party rule very rarely ends well for the average person. And it's like, it's been proven over and over again. Democrats don't do great when they're in charge of everything. Illinois is an example. Republicans don't do great when they're in charge of anything. Louisiana. It's more corruption, more entitlement, less oversight, less connection with their actual voters. Competition is what I think keeps politicians paying attention. If they feel like they don't have to pay attention, that's it doesn't matter if it's a Democratic politician or Republican politician or anybody, that's a bad thing. More competition is good for the average person.
Obviously, we believe that. And when you've got 70% during any election year of offices where they don't have a choice, there's only one candidate.
Correct.
But as you're looking at the landscape, what issues are you seeing beyond the obvious ones of immigration, but what issues are you seeing that are really spurring people that are
economy? I hate to, echo Carville all the time, but it is like, I think people, a couple things. I think people want to feel as though the people in charge understand them, understand their struggles, understand their hopes, understand their worries. And I think that manifests itself most obviously in the economy. You know, like, I think one of Joe Biden's biggest problems as president was he talked about these sort of esoteric economic indicators, CPI, GDP. The average person has no clue what the hell any of that is or means. And I think in their lived life, they thought, I don't think he gets me. And I think Trump, in a weird way, was able to, because he's a terrible messenger for this, but in a weird way was able to sort of be the voice of the, I get you, I see you. So I think it's that. I also think there's like a level of basic competence that I think people are struggling with. They just don't feel like politicians do much of anything, and don't address things. That there's this vast area. I hear this all the time. I'm sure you guys do. There's this vast area in the middle ideologically where there are issues: education, phone. What are we going to do about phones and social media and pornography? And to his credit, Rahm Emanuel, who is not a top tier 2028 candidate, though I think he will run, I give him credit. He's was in Mississippi recently talking about education. He's talking about a social media ban. There's a huge number of issues that aren't immigration, Greenland, like that. A large swath of the country, like in between the two 40-yard lines, would be like, yes, there is a common sense solution we agree on.
You're actually talking about Mike Duggan's platform. I mean, really, that's what he's running his campaign on. Yeah.
And I
education,
think
job creation, like what matters to Michiganders.
That's it. And I think that there's a lot. I always tell people, remember, our two-party system is set up to accentuate that with which we disagree. The truth is, we agree on, I mean, pick your number, but it's definitely north of 70% of stuff. You want your kids to have a good life. You want your health options to be affordable. You want to have some level of job security. You know what I mean? It's not. You don't want your kid to be addicted to their phone. These are not Democratic ideas or Republican ideas. The problem is our political system is set up where it's like they want no taxes on tips and we want, or on immigration. I don't think anyone thinks we should just let the borders be open. It's a how do we do it? And we get so caught up on I always say probably 5% of stuff with which we disagree, but that's how politicians get elected. That's how they raise money. It's how they motivate their bases, right? So the 5% makes it, you feel, if you're just watching it, like 85%, when in fact, there's a huge area where you can say, look, I'm going to address this. You're not going to agree with me on everything. You might think that we shouldn't get rid of social media until kids are 16, or we should, but we all know. I mean, my view is social media and phones are going to be like cigarettes were when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I'm 49. When I was a kid, my pediatrician smoked in the room. I mean, that's unimaginable. My kids are 16 and 13, right? It's unimaginable for my kids. Like, it's just because we've learned smoking, it's not debatable. It is bad for you. And yes, these tobacco companies knew that it was bad for you and kept this from them. I think in 20 years, I hope maybe sooner, it's not going to be a debate over whether the addiction we have to our phones and social media is a good or bad. It's a bad thing for attention spans, for, how we exist in the world. And my guess is there's going to be a whistleblower or two in these big tech companies that say they knew that and they didn't, so that's an issue. Talk about that.
And
it affects everybody. Everybody's got one of these.
Somewhere between 70 to 80% of all Americans agree that something should be done to protect young people.
It's just, there are so many issues like that. If you start, we're talking about top down versus bottom up, right? If you start from the idea of, okay, what do a bulk of people don't necessarily agree on, but think needs to be addressed? Okay, I'm going to start with those issues. Instead, we start on the other side. What are the things that people disagree most vehemently about? That's what we're going to talk about.
Issues.
Trans boys playing girl sports. I mean, wherever you land on that, it is an infinitesimally small group of people that are affected. I mean, we're talking about 0.00 whatever 1% of the people who are athletes, much less people in the country. And yet we fixate on this, and you have Donald Trump saying, they want trans for everybody. And the ad that they ran in the 2024 campaign about Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for us, was incredibly effective. And yet what how often do I think about that as an issue? Never.
Chris, I want to ask you this because you're uniquely qualified, I think, to answer it in that you write and talk about this all day for a living, and everything that we're discussing, this huge swath of issues upon which most of us can agree. You know, we all throw language around like moderate, centrist, center. They're actually not accurate representations of that 45% of Americans that are registered as independents, right? Like those people are not a monolith, and actually the word moderate polls terribly, right? Like. And so if we're talking about trying to mobilize a movement of these people that agree on things, and the idea that people are like radical moderates, like how do we radicalize centrism?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're, first of all.
chapter, that was the title of my last chapter.
Was radical centrism?
A need for radical moderates.
A need for radical moderates. So as you write and talk about this, Chris, what sort of language can we as a movement be using to better represent what we're wanting to accomplish? And how do we make it more resonant?
I always think Donald Trump actually, I don't know whether it's purposeful, strategic, or accidental. I tend to lean toward accidental, but he comes across some language at times that is quite good. Common sense. He talked during the campaign, he talked about common sense. Like, these aren't Republican or Democratic issues. This is common sense. Boys shouldn't be playing in girls' sports. He always talk about it as related to transgender stuff. But I actually think if you say, look, I'm not focused on right or left or the middle, because I don't think the average person thinks of this, where do I fit on the political spectrum? Regular people don't think like that. They don't think of like, here's Ted Cruz on one end and Bernie Sanders on the other end, and where do you fit in between? They just live their lives, right? So I think you talk about common sense solutions to the problems we all know we face societally. That to me, and that's phones, falling behind in terms of education. What do we do about AI, right? Everybody talks about it. What do we do? What should we do about it? What can we do about ensuring that our economy is AI proofed in some way so that all these jobs just don't disappear? Like, I don't think you have to talk about AI. I think some people roll their eyes because talk about esoteric. I think the average person, no clue. Well, I mean, I don't really have a clue. I use ChatGPT. That's the extent of my AI knowledge. But talk about, okay, we know this is going to disrupt the jobs market in America and around the world. How can I've got 5 ideas. I think we have a deficit of ideas in this country politically. I think everyone is so terrified of saying something that might get them canceled or might get Donald Trump's focus on you. Like, we don't have when's the last time you heard like a really good, interesting new idea about how to address an existing problem from one of the leaders of the 2 political parties? It doesn't happen.
Yeah, and we've talked at Forward about the importance of us being a party that has no sacred cows, right? So it's not just about the advancement of ideas. It's a commitment to actually really address these huge issues that Congress and past administrations have continued to kick down the path.
And, our founding with Andrew Yang really came out of the idea that he saw this great impact of AI coming to change our workforce. Yeah. And he threw out a new idea that could neither be pegged as left or right necessarily under Universal Basic Income or UBI. And that drew a lot of attention. Now, whether or not we don't even have UBI as part of our platform, that's not part of what we as the Forward Party. But it was a big idea. But it was a big idea, and it got people talking about this idea about what are we going to do to protect our workforce in the future when jobs are being made obsolete.
And I think one of the things that I think is so funny is when people say to me, like, UBI is a great example. People are like, it'll never work. And I always say to people, I'm just going to stop you there. I'm no like advocate or hater of UBI, but who's the current president of the United States? Okay, it's Donald Trump. You know how many times people told me in 2015 and 2016 and in 2021, 22, 23, 24 that he could never be elected president? A whole lot of times. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and you guys in elected office, you know this. He literally does almost everything that a consultant or your basic political instincts would tell you not to do. So I think we have to accept that the rules, not just for politics, but the old way of doing things, gosh knows this is true in my profession of media, the old ways and the old things and thoughts that governed fill in the blank could never happen. I think we're through the looking glass on that. Like, I think we have to be open to, we are facing, AI is at least the biggest societal change since the internet. It may well wind up eclipsing the internet, but we are facing these massive societal changes, right? The media is fundamentally changing. What people want out of their politicians is fundamentally changing. The way corporations, we have these nation state corporations, we are living in a world that is simply different than it was 20 years ago. And my kids who are 16 and 13 will grow up in a world that are growing up in a world that is fundamentally different than Chris Cillizza at 16 years old, growing up in rural Connecticut. We can't have the same tired ideas that we have. And I would also say they don't have to be all or nothing ideas. The idea that there's black and white only on every issue. It's like either we close the borders and we round up tons of people, including people who are here legally, and we treat them really harshly because that's the only way we can solve it. Or we basically don't enforce immigration policy and we let people come into the country legal. No, there's a massive amount of policy that can be done in between those two poles. But again, the current political system solves for the 5% that we disagree, not the 95% that we agree.
Well, I think
they want to keep those going.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and in this new world of innovation that we're all living in, I think it's time for a new political party as part of that innovation. And Chris, thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys for having me.
Such a treat.
I am watching with bated breath because I'm fascinated to see. I think the bottom up approach is the right approach. Like that is a cornerstone thing you have to get right.
Oh, thank you. And come back. We want to have you back again.
Thank you.
Invite me back. Happy to come. Thank you all.
We'll have you
Good
back.
to see you guys.
Great. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Take care. You
Bye-bye.
bet.
Bye.
Well, he's fantastic and fascinating. And I think that his perspective, given the swath of kinds of people he's interviewing every single day, is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Both in, I think in affirming our optimistic vision of what we can build, but also, like, what is he hearing from naysayers? What do we need to be factoring in terms of, really creating this aspirational vision for change that maybe people we haven't met them there yet.
Well, he's going to be really helpful. That kind of insight is important. We need it.
Last fall, I had the opportunity to visit with our next guest in person, where he took me through the historical precedent for the creation of a new political party in the United States of America. Dr. Jeremi Suri is an incredible, brilliant, published academic and chair of the leadership in global affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. So we are thrilled to have Dr. Jeremi Suri join us today to talk about historical precedent for the creation of a new political party in America. Welcome to the Forward Party podcast, Dr. Jeremi Suri. We are thrilled to have you with us today.
I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Dr. Suri, when we had a chance to sit down last year in Austin, we talked about your research around the Civil War and why you see trends and historical precedents right now for the creation of a new political party, given where we are right now as a country. Talk to our viewers about that.
So I think there are a number of times in our history when we have gone through major shifts from one party system to another. Our structure of government tends to create a bias to two parties because of a winner-take-all system in the various states. But the parties often lose their connection to the public, especially when the country has gone through shifts in its economy, in its place in the world. So the first real example of this, of course, is the 1850s, when the world of sort of agrarian small towns is now being replaced by capitalist development, by early industrial development, and the existing parties aren't resonating with those, for instance, living in states like Ohio, Illinois, and elsewhere. And that's how you get a new party, the Republican Party, that's formed then. We see a similar phenomenon in the early 20th century as well, with the development of insurgencies within both parties that restructure the Democratic and Republican Party. This is the era of Theodore Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party and things of that sort. What ends up happening is a set of political actors emerge who are able to speak to issues that are not being addressed as the country has changed. And those new actors are able to build cleavages that either form a party to replace a prior party, which in this case would be the Republicans replacing the Whigs in the 1850s, or to redefine and take over a party in the sense as progressives do for much of the Republican Party in the early 20th century. And so that's the moment we're in now. I think The way Americans work, the way Americans live, the way Americans communicate is no longer well represented in either of the existing parties. And so there's an opportunity for a new party to speak to citizens, those who are disenchanted, and particularly those who are newly entering the system, organize them, and use that organization to shift the way our politics operate.
Dr. Suri, it's a fascinating idea that things happen when the major concerns of the people aren't being addressed by the current parties. And that certainly seems to be the situation today when we've started having very esoteric conversations that are wedge issue conversations, as opposed to talking about the meat and potatoes of what people actually care about. Are there particular issues that you see in your research that could be galvanizing issues if they were embraced by a third-party movement?
Yes, I think there are a number of very important issues today that resonate actually with these other periods that I spoke about. My students, who I have the privilege of teaching 300 every semester, they're entering a world of work that is not a world of labor unions in the old Democratic Party version, but it's not a world of little entrepreneurs, single entrepreneurs either, or corporations. It's actually a much more complicated space that they're operating in. And many of them, for example, do not want to be over-regulated, but at the same time, they want health insurance. They're concerned about that. Many of them do not want to be limited and forced to join a union, but they want protections so that they're not mistreated because of their race or because of their background. They want access to education. They want that to be affordable. But they want it to also be the best education in the world. They want it to be international. So there are a number of these issues where their economic trajectory is very different from what's assumed by the traditional union-based Democratic Party or by the traditional corporate-focused Republican Party or even sort of Silicon Valley entrepreneurship that might somehow be associated with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party as well. They're living in a much more complicated economic space, and I think that's what they're looking to have addressed. They don't feel either party addresses when they graduate from college what their future is going to be. I see this also when we talk about issues of people's personal choices in their lives. Most of my students don't care whether you are gay or straight or whatever, and they don't care actually where you're from so long as you're willing to work hard and work with them. And I think that's not really represented in our politics either. And then I think they also are cynical because they see that the two existing parties are so dominated by money, by big money, and they feel left out. They feel locked out in their choices. So those are three. I think we could go on, but those are three issues which I think resonate with these other party moments when there was a look to reform what was a sclerotic set of parties in place.
How do you compare this? I mean, we have gone through as a country, well, the world does this, but I mean, we were an agrarian society, then we moved into the manufacturing and a lot of the farmers went broke. And then now we've moved into more of the AI intellectual type of economy. And all those dislocations frustrated people. How do you see this time now as different from those times? And how did government's reaction to those times get us through?
Well, I think, Governor, it's I think the most important question. First of all, that shift is happening. And I think that historic shift tells us that from our past experiences, government is going to have to play a role. Each of those shifts you defined was influenced. And when we were able to adjust, it was because of help from government. That doesn't mean government controlling things. That's different. But government providing assistance. For example, in the 1850s, a very important Republican policy was for the government to invest in infrastructure, building railroads, for instance. In the progressive era, it's investing in public education. We invent the public high school in the United States. Sometimes it's local government, sometimes it's federal government. There's going to be a government role, but government is going to have to be focused on solving problems, not serving ideological predilections. There's always some ideology involved. But I think too much of what we have today is an effort to be politically correct, left or right, rather than to be problem-focused. And I'll come back to the issue of health insurance because I hear it so often from my students and my students from 10, 20 years ago. also, right? It doesn't matter whether you're an AI or you're working as someone as an artist or whatever it is. In the world of today, you need health insurance to stay healthy. And for so many people, it is unaffordable. That doesn't mean that people want a British-style National Health Service because they value the high-quality care they're getting. But we cannot continue to be a society where my students, when they graduate, and others who have been out for a long time, stay in jobs they don't want because they need health insurance, and they cannot move into the spaces where they can be most productive and, quite frankly, most successful. So that's one of many examples. Affordability, obviously, is another one. All of these issues, Governor, are places where intelligent, non-ideological government pragmatism can make a huge difference.
Well, that's what we'd all like, is intelligent, non-controversial, non-contentious discussion of these important issues. We're trying for that with the Forward Party. That's where
and you're
we
certainly right about healthcare being one of those most important issues that is being neglected by both major parties right now. There have been no new ideas put forward by either side for a very long time, and yet we see that bankruptcies, the leading cause of bankruptcy is medical debt. And so people do live in fear of this, and it is an impediment to people feeling that they can actually achieve the American dream.
Yeah. Dr. Suri, one of the things that we hear from folks, we are extraordinarily committed to building this party from the ground up. We are a party of grassroots leadership across the country. But we do hear from folks, well, who's your candidate, right? Who is that big person? And I think when people think of a third party, they think of Ross Perot or Mike Bloomberg. What in your experience, how do you view that, given your experience here? Because right now we're talking about the issues being the galvanizing force, not the figure themselves. Do you think that the issues alone, or do we need a single figurehead?
Well, it's always a mix of these things, right? You ask any historian a question like that, they'll say it's a little bit of both, right? But you cannot be fixated on individuals. It has to be around the issues. You need articulate figures who can articulate and galvanize people around those issues. But it has to be the issues. What draw people to move out of their existing location as partisans historically is when they feel they have an issue that has not been addressed, or that the existing parties are condescending to them around those issues. So that's the story of the Republican Party in the 1850s, and it's the story of progressivism in the early 20th century. But it's also the story of how the South shifted from being a Democratic stronghold to a Republican stronghold, because many white voters believed issues of race were not being addressed in the way they wanted them addressed during the civil rights movement and thereafter. And so it is about the issue, but then you need the articulate figures who can speak powerfully and authentically to those issues.
Thank you to Dr. Jeremi Suri for joining us today, and can't wait to come down to Austin and join you on your podcast. So interesting perspective today. We really zoomed out, looking at both historical context for reform, the launch of new parties, talking to Chris Cillizza about the realities in our country right now, where independent voters are and how they view the viability of a new political party.
It's been an interesting day, and the differences between them have been fascinating as well, and I think have given us some insights as to more challenges that we face.
I think both Chris and the professor had this notion that we need to be addressing the issues that the two-party duopoly have decided that they're going to ignore in favor of wedge issues that are trying to divide us, that forward candidates need to be talking about what really matters to people. Yeah. And our instruction to our candidates that they should simply represent the interests and the concerns of their constituents, and that they shouldn't be somehow worried about any kind of partisan issue or towing the line for any policies that we're representing, is really very powerful right now, because that's how you're going to get back in touch with your local needs and concerns. And I think in doing so, our candidates are going to be authentic. I think they're going to be viewed as truth tellers, and they're going to be able to just be pragmatic problem solvers that get things done for their community. And so if that's our reputation, that would be a wonderful one to have.
And that seems to be what our candidates are doing and why they've been successful. I mean, what are we, 76 now?
76 candidates, yeah, or 76 elected officials.
Are associated with Forward Party, and they got elected, I believe, because they were genuine, and they didn't feel they had to just respond to a party at all, a party platform. They were responding to their constituents, which is what they wanted and what all elected officials should do anyway.
Yeah. Chris said two words that are two words you say in conjunction with one another quite often, which is big ideas. He said, Americans are looking for big ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's time. And neither of the parties are incentivized right now to move any of those ideas forward.
Right. Real solutions.
And the other thing that parties need to do, or politicians need to do for the public, is to help them make sense of really complicated moments in history, big changes that, you're experiencing it from your standpoint, but how do you actually think about what AI means to the world now? Like, what will the future look like because of that? We need to be able to help people think about how they're going to view that, and also how they're going to have a job, how they're going to support their family, how they're going to have health care, how they're going to be able to continue to do all the things they need to do in this new modern world. And to the extent that the two parties who are currently in charge of politics in America are just ignoring these huge social changes that are happening, they're getting way behind. So we need to bring up these key issues and help people understand how it matters to them and what can be done.
And have some solutions too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's necessary. A lot of people talk about the big issues and say how they're going to solve them, and then they don't say how they're going to solve them. And they don't really let the public know these are complicated issues. It's not going to happen overnight. We're going to have to take certain steps to get where we want to go. But I think that's just as critical, as otherwise people say, you had your 100 days and you haven't done anything. I mean, where the 100 days comes from anyway, I don't know, because it's ridiculous. You don't get much done in your first 100 days in office. I mean, you can get a lot done, but not solve every problem. But expectations, I think, are a big issue that we have, because so many politicians, I've had more people say to me, well, why should I believe them? Because the minute they get in office, they forget what they said. And that's where our candidates and our office holders are so important, because they're showing that, no, I got into office and I'm continuing to do just what I said I was going to do.
And I know you, Lindsey, are working on a number of these direct democracy tools that will actually help keep our politicians in contact with their constituents so that they can be responsive to the things that matter most, and they can know in a split second where their voters stand on a particular issue that's of importance to them. I think that will distinguish the Forward Party in the long run, to be able to be that responsive and that knowledgeable about the people who elected them.
Yeah, I think reducing that space between elected officials and their voters is critically important and a huge imperative of the Forward Party. How do we create a more direct and responsive democracy? And the technologies are all there. We just have to change the incentive systems for our elected officials to pay attention.
Well, you're putting together tools, too. We're putting together tools for them to use in a very easy way so the candidates can access them. That makes it far easier for them to reach out to their constituents and really communicate with them in a way that makes sense to them.
Well, we talk oftentimes right now about the choices that folks have if they're in current sitting positions of elected office. One is to toe the party line. The other is to be miserable and kind of take it from both sides all day long and worry that you're being threatened, that you're going to be primaried. Or, Chris was talking about Mike Duggan, and, Mayor Duggan has been endorsed by a number of Democratic members of the Michigan legislature, and the Democratic Party pulled those individuals access to Democratic Party campaign tools. So, you speak out and you try and have an independent voice, and the party punishes you. And so then the third option for these folks is to retire. And, our work at the Forward Party is to actually is to provide an alternative to that.
Yeah, a fourth option, which is come to us.
Come to us.
Come to us.
Exactly.
Don't
Come to
retire.
us.
I'm always so saddened when I see these great public
good
servants
ones.
retiring. Some of the best public servants that we have are retiring rather than be defeated by either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party because they're not towing the line.
Going through the process,
or
knowing you're going to be defeated because
Exactly.
they're pulling all your money, they're running somebody against you.
And you don't have to. You can come to the Forward Party and we will support you, and we will find fellow travelers who will vote for you. So I hope that people of principle and character who want to serve will come to us and hear that message.
That is a direct appeal. Come to the Forward Party. Anybody who's in a current position of elected office and is exhausted by the strong arming that you're experiencing that prevents you from being able to authentically represent your constituents, call us. We've got your back.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us today.